want to get your thoughts on the anniversary. Here we are 20 years later. What you think about when you reflect on that conflict, but also where you think stands with the America's decision and ability to wage war today.
First, as always in these scenarios, it's important to put yourself back in that moment when these decisions were made. I was in the Pentagon on 9/11. The aircraft struck 150 feet to the right of my office. I'm very lucky to be here today. There was a huge emotion in the country, and I think that Richard's right. That emotion translated into a series of policy decisions that haunt us today. But it's important to put it in that context of the emotion of the moment. And then secondly, the real question is, what does this tell us about the limits of American power in the world? And I think we have to recognize that, as Fareed Zakaria has said, we're not the sole superpower, but we're not a declinist nation either. Others have risen. We have to deal with that. We have returned now to an era of real great power politics. It's a very different world than taking on this war of choice in Iraq, but avoiding the deeply dangerous idea of a war with China. That's why this meeting between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, the leaders of autocratic nations, is so important for us to watch carefully this week and see what comes out of it.
Now, I want to ask you, Admiral, just a balance, if you could, talk about the tragedy of Iraq. We have well over 4,000 U.S. troops killed there, well over 100,000 Iraqis killed from the violence that sprang from that war. I'm just curious, what was the cost to the United States long term?
Exactly as Richard says, it is now being thrown at us as though it's a moral equivalent to what's happening in Ukraine. In other words, I often hear from not just people from the global south, Brazil, Nigeria, Pakistan, India, but also Europeans will say, well, why is it so terrible that Putin is invading Ukraine? After all, you invaded Iraq. That's a real cost to us. There are correct answers to that question that makes it different.
What's your answer? What's your answer to that question?
Yeah, my answer is the moral equivalent would be if the United States decided to invade Canada, annex it, absorb all of its mineral resources, took Canadian children and moved them back to the United States.
Welcome to another episode of the Nick and CJ Show, a very special one. I'm one of your hosts. I'm CJ. What's up, Nick?
What's poppin', my friends, my family? Man, this is about to be a great week. Welcome to RBN. We have a powerful guest. We're going to have a powerful week, man. That video was ridiculous. I can't wait to get our guest, Professor Anthony Zenkus, his opinion on that. But these are the most evil people on the planet. And this is the people I focus on. These are the people I believe that we need to put pressure on. We shouldn't waste any time focusing on calling out the enemies of the greatest evil empire that humans have seen in recent history. That guy is about as evil as it comes, because when he was asked about the Iraq war, his response wasn't about, oh my God, 2.5 million Iraqis died there. That was a giant mistake. We need to atone. He said, look at what this cost the United States. Look at what it cost our empire politically. No concern over the loss of human lives.
Whatsoever.
That is a psychopath of the highest order. Do you guys understand? Every U.S. official should sound extremely apologetic every single time Iraq comes up. The amount of human lives that you guys destroyed in this war, 2 million plus Iraqis dead.
Nick, you're saying 2 million. You're saying 2 million. You know, in that segment, we're gonna. I mean, when we get to the segment, but you know, in the segment, they only say 100,000.
Of course they do. I use the real death number, but it's actually more than that because there's way more people who was displaced. How many children was orphaned? How many wives are now single mothers because of that? How many parents lost their kids? These are things that these warmongering psychopaths don't even think about. And not even just the death count. What about the community cost of these wars? But when we ask about the Iraq war, he was like, well, think about how much that damaged the United States. No fucks given about the Iraqi people. That's why they are as evil as they come. Now I'm gonna get our guest in here.
Yes.
Welcome to RBN once again, my friend. Anthony Zenkus, I would love to get your thoughts on this. Great to always have you on, my friend.
Yeah, great to be here. I've been following, you've been both doing, and the whole channel has been doing some great work. Of course, so we're, it's good to have a lifeline into sanity. I don't often get that. And, oh, by the way, happy anniversary. Happy Iraq War anniversary. It's great that we celebrate or recognize. It's just so bizarre. That occurred to me too. What you said, Nick and CJ, just that in the original tweet that the assistant to Colin Powell put out, no mention of the human cost.
Yes.
None. Zero. So we know with people like this, human lives never enter into the equation. And I think, it's relevant. And, anybody who on the Democrat side or remotely on the left who thinks there's a mild chance that we are in Ukraine to save lives and that we're in Ukraine for democracy
ridiculous.
Needs to ask themselves what changed in the United States all of a sudden, right?
They grew up conscious now, because you don't get it. People like Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, they would sleep. Anthony Blinken, Joe Biden, their conscience was eating them at night. So now they decide they want to be good in the world now.
And I think about that, and I also remember, and I think the Iraq War is an excellent reference point for us with Ukraine. Remember the 300 Kuwaiti babies and incubators that were killed? They weren't killed. So there was, whenever you hear a story about atrocities, it just, for those that don't know, right before the U.S. attacked Iraq in 2003, what ended up happening was there was a news story where a young woman said she was working in a hospital and there were 300 babies on incubators, which, by the way, would be a lot. Right? It would be a lot of babies for any single hospital to have on incubators at one time.
300?
Yeah, it was something like 300. And then she said that the Iraqi soldiers who invaded Kuwait went into the hospital and unplugged all the incubators because they're fighting a war, but they took time out to commit the war crime and the atrocity of killing all these Kuwaiti babies who then died. And I remember hearing that story thinking, that doesn't sound like something an army would do. There's no strategic value there. Why would they do it? And then it turns out it never happened. And the person who reported it didn't work in a hospital. She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States. And she had given like a speech before the UN. So when we hear about these atrocities, always remember their playbook. They just make shit up. And they don't care about lives. It's never been about lives.
Professor, the only way Americans even find it believable is because of Hollywood. We have to understand how Hollywood is intertwined in even making Americans or getting Americans to even believe this. Because you say, why would they stop and go into this place and unplug all this stuff? That wouldn't happen in real life. But you know where it would happen?
Yes.
In a Hollywood movie when you're trying to create a bad character. You know what I'm saying? That actually would happen. Let's go in there and do this to these babies. You know what I'm saying? So it makes it believable to the average American, unfortunately.
That's such a great point. That's such a great point, CJ. That Hollywood creates the villain. And you guys also have to understand that Western chauvinism plays a very giant part of this. Racism, white supremacy plays a big part of this as well. So we have Ukrainian Nazis on video on video, torturing people, reminding people to pose. Like, there's countless evidence of this stuff on Twitter. Meanwhile, you go to a white liberal and say, oh my God, they're Ukrainian Nazis. They killed their own people. They say, nuh-uh, they will never do something like that. Meanwhile, you can say anything about Asian country, anything about African country, anything about Middle Eastern country, and they will immediately believe whatever the United States State Department says about the Iraqi people, whatever they say about the DPRK, whatever they say about China, because of course those savages would do that. You guys understand where the racism comes into that? Mm-hmm. That's the racism that makes my skin crawl, and that we need to defeat. Racism and white supremacy enables imperialism because it allows people to fall for these lies. And the people deep down inside, they feel like they're fighting for their race, right? We're the white American conquerors following the path of the Crusaders, fighting against the evil Muslims. And that's how George W. Bush sold his wars. He said it was a holy war. God told him they're going to fight Iraq. And then evangelicals like, hell yeah. Decolonize your minds, ladies and gentlemen. This super chat by Jay, 999. Just today, the United States vehemently opposed a chance for peace in Ukraine and approved another 300. I lose track every single fucking week. Another multi-$100 million deal goes to Ukraine, bringing the total to $125 billion. Show the empire's priorities, and that's as East Palestine is still not getting the aid they need, still being abandoned by the neoliberals. Like, there should be like massive payments going out to all these people, but they can't do that. That will get people dependent on the government if you did that. Meanwhile, they increasing pensions and giving Ukrainians money. Like, they literally giving them money in their pockets, as said by Joe Biden. So that shows their priorities. Now, I want to show you guys this here because I know Zenkus has some words about this. Because to cover the hypocrisy, especially of Jim Crow Joe in the Democratic Party regarding East Palestine, you had the Associated Press. I don't know if you covered this yet, CJ, but I wanted to. This is so absurd, and I want to get Professor Zenkus' thoughts on this as well. Look at this, RussiaGate.
Not yet. Not yet.
What are we at? 2.0, 3.0, 4.0? We on some advanced level RussiaGate shit now.
There's more RussiaGate variants than there are Omicron variants. It's disturbing.
That's a good one.
There's.
I would say like what 5.5. Like, this is crazy. Because now RussiaGate is so strong that liberals are calling for nuclear war against Russia. That's how gone they are. And now they're saying pro-Moscow voices try to steer Ohio train disaster debate. So what this article is saying that these people that was voicing concern over deregulation, over the fact that Joe Biden had a horrific response to this. Pete Buttigieg had a horrific response to this. I'll just read the first two paragraphs and I want you guys to react. Soon after the train derailed and spilled toxic chemicals in Ohio, anonymous pro-Russian accounts started spreading misleading claims and anti-American propaganda. You mean telling the truth about the failures of this corporate state?
Mm-hmm.
That's now anti-American propaganda. Calling out how Jim Crow Joe is sending 300 million more to Nazis in Ukraine, as people in East Palestine was lied by their government. I'm going to show you guys here later about how it was safe. They're not getting the resources that they need. But that's anti-American propaganda. So I keep reading because I want you guys to respond as well. And then look, you see the Elon Musk jab as well to go after the monkey brain and the liberals' mind, using Elon Musk's new verification system to expand their reach. So these anti-American, pro-Russia accounts manipulated Twitter and Elon Musk's verification system so people will take them seriously, unlike the great people at the Associated Press. The last paragraph I read, and I pass to you guys. The accounts, which parroted Kremlin talking points on admired topics, claimed without evidence that authorities in Ohio were lying about the true impact of the chemical spill, which they was. Yes. And I will show you guys that later. The account spread fear-mongering posts that preyed on legitimate concerns about pollution and health effects and compared the response to the derailment with America's support for Ukraine following its invasion of Russia. Like anyone would do. You guys spend all this money on Ukraine, but what about East Palestine? So I'll pass it to the professor first, and then we go CJ. You see that insane propaganda? This is why we're the most propagandized country.
Yeah, well, when I saw it yesterday, of course, I was like, God, it's like clockwork. I was waiting for if you care about human lives and wildlife in East Palestine, you are a pro-Russian agent. I was waiting for it, hadn't heard it yet. And then I saw that. So I did a little digging and I found out some interesting things independently. So did Aaron Mate, who is actually an investigative journalist. So I recognize that. But I did a couple of things, and here's what I found out. So interestingly, AP reports that the guy's name is David Kepler. That's the so-called journalist, because this is not journalism. This is propaganda. He goes 5 paragraphs in, everything stated as if it happened and as if it were fact. And then in paragraph number 6, David Kepler goes, by the way, this information was shared with us. We received it from a group, a nonprofit, London-based nonprofit called Reset. So wait a second. I just read, and look, most people just read the headlines. Some will read a third or a half of the article. But if you did read the whole thing, 5 paragraphs in the beginning act like you would think AP did this investigation. Reputable. It must be fact. They're stating it like fact in paragraph 6. That's where they say, oh, by the way, we received this information from Reset. So I looked into Reset. I'd never heard of it. It's got not a huge trail online. So I was like, all right, this is weird. The guy they quoted, his name is Felix Kotny, Katn. Oh, there I am.
There you go. I brought it up that you're talking about.
Scroll a little bit. We could see his name. If you go to
sorry.
Yeah, go to one of the subtweets. It's like the second subtweet. Yeah, this guy, Felix Carte or Cart, Kartte. He is based in, I think, Berlin. Interestingly, I go to say, well, what's this Felix dude all about? His tweets are locked. Now,
he don't want people to look into it because people. Go ahead, Zenkus.
Then I'd go to his Instagram just for the hell of it. He's got one that's protected too. So now the AP is putting a story out, 5 paragraphs of actually making it sound like they did the investigation. And in paragraph 6 drops the bomb. No, it was this group that you've never heard of called Reset, which only has like, I think, less than a dozen people working for them. They're just some little thing. And the person who told us was Felix Carte, who doesn't have an online presence. So is that even a reputable source? And by the way, aren't they supposed to double source things? That's typical journalism. They didn't do that. And then we find out that who funds Reset? Well, they get Aaron Mate did a deep dive into Luminate, which is one of their big funders who they're part of. But they were also received a lot of money from the Sandler Foundation. The Sandler Foundation, started by bankers, also gives money to the Truman Center for Foreign Policy. Who does the Truman Center for Foreign Policy also get money from? BAE Systems, a defense contractor, and Lockheed Martin. So interestingly, nowhere in the article does it even say that this group is receiving money from a foundation that regularly gives money to programs or organizations that are deeply connected with the military-industrial complex. Deeply connected. So they're warmongers who see a profit in continuing it. This was no evidence, no second corroboration, just this guy told us. This guy's Felix planted a story. That's what he did. And they ran it. The AP ran it. No corroboration.
And you guys think other countries are more propagandized than we are? Because how many people are going to do the research like Professor Zenkus, like Glenn Greenwald did? Aaron Mate also has a great tweet exposing it. Not many people are going to look at this. Most Americans are going to see the headlines, see the story, and assume because that's how American propaganda groomed us, that this person that got this story in AP is there for merit reasons. If this guy, who the fuck, where the fuck did they find this guy from? And if you look at his profile, you don't have to go back to it, but his profile says disinfo expert. How the fuck do you become a disinfo expert? As far as I'm concerned,
I guess you're an expert if you're the one spreading it. I guess you are.
Yeah.
If you're the one spreading it.
As far as I'm concerned, we're all disinfo experts because we debunk mainstream media propaganda. So why didn't they choose anyone that debunks corporate media propaganda as a disinfo expert? It's a bullshit title. But CJ, I know you want to chime in.
Yeah, I just wanted to read sort of a couple of Glenn's tweets here. It says the shady group uncritically relied on by AP to malign concerns over the East Palestine as emanating from pro-Moscow accounts is the same source you were just talking about. A professor is funded by Pierre. I think this is the same one who owns
Yep. The Intercept.
The Intercept. Yes, I don't know how to say his name. Omidyar. The same guy who owns, he owns the Intercept. The fake disinformation and Russia tracking industry created after 2016 is overwhelmingly funded by him. It's overwhelmingly funded by the Intercept guy. And then here he goes on to say, after the 2016 election, how you say his name again, Professor?
I think it's Omidyar.
Omidyar. That sounds about right. Political focus radically changed. He become a fanatic Russiagator, blaming everything on the Kremlin and Trump. He took a small part of his $9 billion net worth and funded his new bullshit industry that is behind all of these stories. And then he just gives like an example, these things that he's talking about. So just want to show that receipt about this story and how phony it is. And like you said, Aaron Mate also breaks it down. It's amazing. It's amazing.
I think it's
what they try to get biased. Go ahead, Professor.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't understand how David Kepler has a job when he receives what amounts to a press release from a small nonprofit and doesn't corroborate any of it. That is the prime task of a journalist, to corroborate two independent sources. There are no independent sources. There's only the group that released the press release. It's bizarre. And what are they trying to say? They're trying to say that if you are concerned about the lack of governmental response to the suffering of the people in East Palestine, Ohio, and beyond, because this is spread beyond there, then you are a Russian agent, that you're doing the work of the Kremlin. Vladimir Putin wants you to criticize the United States government, where what they're also saying is that it is impossible that there's any organic anger at the Republicans who run Ohio, because they've done shit for these people, and the Democrats who are in the White House. You can't criticize your government, and this is very dangerous. Russia is considered an enemy. You're now saying that if I stand up for the environment, I'm aligned with what you're considering an enemy of the United States. This is such a blatant and transparent attempt to not hold Biden accountable. Biden actually promised to go and never went. But remember, he did go to Ukraine and gave Zelensky more money. And I said in my tweet, aren't the lives of Americans in East Palestine as important as the lives of Ukrainians? Could we at least get to that point? Nothing. It's Russian disinformation.
Yeah, so blatant. So CJ, unless you have any other takes, we can do announcements, and then
I'll go some announcements.
We can do your story first, and then I can do the Marjorie Taylor Greene story after that.
Okay. I'll do the Iraq story just to get it, because we kind of already started talking about it. But first, everyone, make sure you join our Substack. We are seeing a little growth in our channel, so make sure you get on our Substack, because YouTube is not notifying you. Like, we can be live right now, and you can go on YouTube, and we're not even shown at the top. We're shown below videos that are not even
I
live.
follow
So,
it on my personal channel, and I didn't get a notification. I never do. So we'll go ahead.
yeah. So make sure you join our Substack so you get those notifications for live streams, and also when we drop clips. Like the stream, we just hit about 110 likes, but we had a 275 people watching. So let's target 250 likes for that. Again, thank you for those that have started following us. I think we've crossed 32,200. So I need to update that. So 32,200, I believe that should be updated too. Also, we have memberships is the other thing that's brand new. I think this is.
And if you already subscribed, sorry CJ, but if you already subscribed,
go ahead.
Make sure you guys check and make sure you're still subscribed as
true.
well, because there are people that have been telling me they've been unsubscribed all the time. So make sure you guys check that as well. But go ahead, CJ. Sorry.
Yeah, that is something you probably want to check periodically because it happens like all the time. The other thing, you can check out our website, revolutionaryblackoutnetwork.com. You can check out some of the work we've done, and Professor will come back his call drop or his internet drop. You can check us out there. We can check out some of our community work. We have to update some of the latest stuff, like the war rallies, like RBN. Like a lot of people didn't go. They had reasons not to go to either one, Nick. RBN went to both. RBN went to both rallies. And we had criticism for some of the rallies. So, but that doesn't stop us from going and saying, hey, this is a start. So we did go. Give us a thumbs up. Oh, he's ready. Okay. So we did go. So we're going to add that also to the website. Last thing before I pass it to, or before I get to the stories, here's our email, info@revblacknetwork.com. If you have any questions. If you are interested and participating with RBN and in the local worker strike back, or getting a local worker strike back chapter where you are, email us. We'll see if there's a lot of enough people to in that same area where you're at to try to do something like that. And again, 250 is the target for our likes. Now, this story is so amazing. Of course, we just had the anti-war rally, and then we had the 20-year anniversary of the Iraq War, and by now, even the neocons are coming to the reality that it was a mistake, and they're having to admit it on TV. So at least we've gotten to that place. But you alluded to this earlier, Professor. This is Colin Powell's, I believe, chief of staff, Richard Haas, and he was absolutely destroyed for this tweet. And I'll read it for those that are listening. It says, the U.S. government and my boss at the time, Colin Powell, did not lie about weapons of mass destruction. The word lie involves intent.
What?
There was no lie. We got it wrong. My bad. I guess we misinterpreted intelligence and assumed Saddam was hiding weapons of mass destruction when he was hiding his lack of weapons of mass destruction. No more, no less, and then of course he gets completely destroyed. Here's the professor. Go ahead, Nick. And then
I want to pass to Zenkus if you want to try as well. But who the fuck does he think he's fooling? And this is what the strategy is going to be moving forward, and that's why independent media and what Professor Zenkus and people who call out these people, it's going to be so important moving forward because they are trying to rewrite history in real time. Why you guys think they have George W. Bush dancing on Ellen? Why do you think they're trying to rehabilitate his image? Now they're trying to rewrite the Iraq War. I cannot emphasize this enough. The Iraq War was not a mistake. The Iraq War was a crime. You guys understand? But Zenkus, you want to chime in? Because I can rant on this all day.
Yeah, I mean, well, right. The Iraq War and our ensuing wars for the past 20 years in the Middle East and Africa, because remember, Somalia and Libya is part of Africa too, for Americans who don't know all of that. The whole thing is one big war crime. And remember the Project for a New American Century in the late 1990s said, we need a reason to go to Iraq and occupy the oil fields. We need more of a stronghold in the Middle East. In fact, they had it on their website for years. We need a new Pearl Harbor. Well, by chance, they got one with 9/11. And then after that, we attacked the country that didn't attack, two countries that didn't attack us, because Afghanistan didn't attack us and neither did Iraq. I wonder, to just brush this off and say, look, we got the intelligence, we misinterpreted it. You didn't do your due diligence, because if something isn't true, if something is true, there'll be some evidence of it. Maybe you misinterpret that evidence because something is true and you just don't understand it. But if it's not true, if they don't have WMDs, then of course there's no evidence because they don't have them. What are you misinterpreting? So what these guys did was they went before the world at the United Nations and had props. All of it was fake. All of it was spectacle. See, it's more than a lie. It's spectacle. It's meant to dazzle us. And it's also meant to get into our emotions. There's a reason Colin Powell, who bears a lot of guilt here because he had a lot of credibility. A lot of people respected and liked Colin Powell, and he knew it. And he stood before the UN and the world, and he had all these props. And there's a reason he didn't just read from a page. There's a reason he had props. He had props because he wanted to get an emotional response. Here's the yellow cake uranium. Here are the pictures. They were all fake. It was all spectacle because there were no WMDs in Iraq. So what did you have pictures of? The only reason they had those pictures and the props were for spectacle, to make us go, oh my God, this is bad, to get an emotional reaction. And this is the core definition of propaganda, which is now called public relations. But it's to get an emotional reaction from people deep in our brains that bypasses our ability to think and make judgments. And that's exactly what Colin Powell did. And as a result, millions of innocent people are dead, their lives destroyed, their economy destroyed for generations. That's my take.
So, this is a great comment by Jennifer. I'll pass to you, CJ.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Jennifer always leave great, insightful comments. Invasion of Iraq has much more clarity than Iraq war. So she's Jennifer saying, call it and I need to work on this as well. Don't say the war in Iraq, say the invasion of Iraq. Great point. Calling it the Iraq war actually obfuscates how horrible the United States invasion of Iraq was. So many wars that the West are involved in are invasions. That's a great point, and I definitely will keep that in mind, because I need to start just saying the invasion of Iraq more. Great comment, but CJ, go ahead.
Yeah, and to that point, let's see. So Richard Haas, we saw his comments. I'm sorry, his tweet. Now let's read the comment. So I updated the thing to say the invasion of the Iraq war 20 years later. So to your point, Jennifer, here is this ridiculous article. I only have to read about a minute and a half of this. It's so ridiculous. So, and it's on Project Syndicate. So this is a website you can go if you want to. Yeah, if you want to go and hear some ridiculous nonsense, that you go here. This is where you want to go as ops, you know. So here is what Richard says. It's called Revisiting America's War of Choice. Now he's calling it this phrase, war of choice, in Iraq. And let me blow it up just for those seeing impaired.
Wonder how long they was testing that phrase. Wonder how much they tested that before they decided to go with the war of choice. That's what you calling it? The invasion of Iraq, sir. Let's continue.
It says wars are fought not only for the battlefield, not only on the battlefield, but also in the domestic political debates and in histories written after the fact. In the case, wow, wait, I think I'm getting an epiphany here. Listen to what he just said. He's saying that wars are also fought in how history is written. Not that it's written factually. You hear what he's saying here? Wars are fought not only on the battlefield, but also in domestic political battles in history written after the fact. That's amazing to me. But anyway,
they are trying to condition people to support future wars. You guys understand? They're trying to condition people to support what's coming next. They know what's coming next, so now they're trying to rewrite Iraq in this nonsense way. But continue, CJ.
In the case of the U.S., at least they said, he uses the word here, in the case of the U.S. invasion of Iraq 20 years ago, we are still in the final phase, seeking a elusive consensus about the war's legacy. Like it's up in the air or something. New York. One advantage that historians have over journalists concerns time. Not so much in the sense that they are free from urgent deadlines, but that they have the deeper perspective conferred by the years or decades between events and the actions of writing about them. 20 years is not a long time in historic terms, of course, but when it comes to understanding the war that the U.S. or the United States launched against Iraq in March 2003, it is all we have. Not surprisingly, even 2 decades after the war, there is no consistency regarding its legacy. This is to be expected because all wars are fought 3 times. First comes the political and domestic struggle over the decision to go to war. Then comes the actual war and all that happens on the battlefield. Finally, a long debate over the war's significance ensues, weighing the cost and benefits, determining the lessons learned, and issuing forward-looking policy recommendations. What he's trying to do here is like, now you feel like the emotion is gone. Now let's insert some sort of illogical logic.
That's when the real propaganda.
Because you have to wait till the emotion is gone, and that's what they're testing. This 20-year mark. Is it 20 years? Is it 30 years? Where we can test these things, but this is literally what they're doing. So maybe they've been working on this for 20 years, Professor and Nick, working on what can we do. Maybe that's how long they took them to come up with this choice of war. What does it call it? The choice of war, or choice of Iraq, or whatever. But go and read the rest of this article. This is only part of the segment. The real part is getting to the Morning Joe segment, and go and read where it says the decision to intervene. It is so preposterous. But it is a longer article, so we're not going to be able to read all of it, but go and check that out. Now let me bring up the main event. And you saw the intro to this. Now let's go back to the beginning of this. Now, Morning Joe, of course, had to tackle the Iraq war, but what they decided to do was intertwine 20 years Iraq with Russia and the Ukraine war and China and Russia. So it's 3 stories really that they're intertwining in this segment.
Before you do it, can I just
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
I just want to point out what's on the screen right now. Vanguard Group. Vanguard Group and BlackRock, along with State Street, but mostly Vanguard and BlackRock, own the world. They own every company. They own the military-industrial complex. They own the banks. They own Wall Street. They are the wealthiest entity on the planet today. So no surprise that they're sponsoring Morning Joe anyway.
So we see who's sponsoring Morning Joe, so we know who their audience is. And we always say this. Nick and I always talk about Morning Joe's audience, but let's listen to Morning Joe.
It's 40 past the hour. Welcome back. Turning now to the war in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin visited the Russian-occupied city of Mariupol, located at the southern edge of Ukraine's Donetsk region. Video from Saturday shows Putin driving through the city, touring reconstruction sites and more. In over a year of fighting, it was Putin's first trip to the territory captured by his forces, and it's the closest he's ventured to the front lines. Meanwhile, Chinese leader Xi Jinping is in Moscow right now as he prepares to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He touched down moments ago, and the visit is Putin's most notable diplomatic engagement with another country since he launched his invasion. Russian media claims both leaders will sign a total of 10 documents, including 2 joint statements, one on comprehensive partnership and the other.
I must say, the United States are shaking in their heels over this meeting. It is, and this segment kind of speaks to that, how their fear, and in anytime they're bringing on former NATO people, that means this is a serious segment that we need to propagandize people about. And this guy was the right person to bring on, Admiral James. I forget how to say his last name, but James S. So let's continue to listen.
On economic cooperation up until the year 2030. Joining us now, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, retired 4-star Navy Admiral James Stavridis. He's Chief International Analyst for NBC News and President of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haas. Joe?
Richard, taken together, you think that Putin's visit to Mariupol, as well as Xi's visit to Moscow, sends an ominous message to Ukraine and the world. What is it?
The message is not peace is at hand. The fact that Putin is physically there, so personally associating himself with Mariupol and Crimea the day before, essentially, this is not a man, shall we say, on the brink of peace talks. This is someone who's saying these are Russian territories from his point of view. China, Xi Jinping is flying into it.
Now, you see how they keep conflating territories with peace, but they don't directly say it. They keep saying this isn't peace talks. They're still talking about because that's what they consider. I guess that's what they're trying to equate peace to be, meaning that Putin would have to give up some sort of territories in order for them to agree to a peace deal. That's how I'm reading it. Or is anybody reading it differently?
And the most hilarious thing about this, China, who actually negotiated peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran, China, who wanted to set up a peace talk between Zelensky and Putin that was shut down by Ukraine and the United States. And you had John Kirby, who called ceasefire negotiations with Russia unacceptable. I'm going to bring that video up after your segment here. But meanwhile, on Morning Joe, they were presenting it as, oh my God, Putin and Xi meeting is ominous because it shows that they do not want peace. You mean that's the United States position? This program is nothing but lies. But Zenkus, you want to chime in?
Well, yeah, just this morning, representative of the United States State Department decried Xi's efforts to broker a peace deal, saying a ceasefire was unacceptable. So let's just be real clear here, because whenever I say, and I've been saying it for a year now, since the Russians invaded Ukraine, which I called out when it happened, like invasions are bad. It should not have happened. It was people will suffer and have suffered because of it. Although I do think they had a reason to talk, to have problems with the whole NATO connection and all. I'm against invasions, but it doesn't matter because I immediately called to push for peace. And every time I do, every single time, people say, Putin doesn't want peace. Well, here the United States, literally, official policy, the Biden administration is a ceasefire in Ukraine is unacceptable. And let's just say we think at least 100 to 120,000 troops in Ukraine have been killed. Right now, there is a bit of a news story in the past week or so. about how Ukrainian soldiers at the front are deserting in record numbers. It's gotten so bad that Zelensky had to take his non-democratic, obviously he's an autocrat now, government and greatly increase the penalties for desertion. You wouldn't do that if it wasn't a problem happening in mass. And why are they deserting? This war is brutal. It's terrible. If anybody cares about Ukrainian lives, the only thing you should want is a ceasefire. The United States is saying a ceasefire is unacceptable. Therefore, the United States does not care about Ukrainian lives. And by the way, this guy that they're talking to is from the Council on Foreign Relations. Okay, so they are a pro-war, pro-Wall Street think tank, and they've been around for like 100 years, made up of Wall Street executives, bankers, heads of like military industrial complex companies, chemical companies, and think tanks that are all kind of similar. And they meet in secret. This is literally the council, the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, is a cabal who has supported every single war we've ever had. Every invasion, let's use that term, every invasion of a sovereign nation has been supported by the Council of Foreign Relations. So, of course, Morning Joe and Mika, who were just mouthpieces for the establishment, they have this guy on, and it's horrendous.
I'm going to show you guys this just real quick. Not only is Ukraine suffering through desertion, you now have footage of Ukrainian soldiers kidnapping people. And let me show you guys this. And I see these videos so many times, but whenever they accuse the other side, they never have like these hardcore videos. I'll just read this tweet. Another sad video of mobilization in Odessa, Ukraine. They kidnapped the Russian population from the city, just as they did with the Hungarian, the Romanian people. And this is a footage of what they are doing there. It just shows how desperate the Ukrainian side is becoming with people and manpower, losing 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers, on top of losing political will in Europe. You can pull your stuff back up, CJ. As well as losing political capital to continue this war, while Russia can just stall this out. Russia's just chilling.
So let me insert this. I'm gonna go back to the Joe clip, but let's just get this out of the way because he says it here, and they're gonna say it in that. They're gonna say it in Morning Joe that he's not about peace. Now let's listen. This is both of them sitting together. This is Russia TV who put out this clip. I saw it from Convo Couch. So let's listen.
We have looked closely on your proposals to settle the crisis unfolding in Ukraine. Of course, we will have the opportunity to discuss these proposals. We do know that you are guided by the principles of justice and respecting the fundamental principles of international law, and you are guided by the principle of indivisible security for all countries. You also may be aware, and you're aware that we are open to negotiations. We have looked closely on your proposal.
All right, and then it loops. So you hear from his own mouth, because you get this a lot from Marianne Williamson and people in those types. Oh, he doesn't want peace. What are you talking about? He doesn't want peace. This is specifically from his mouth. And I know you had this clip, but since I have it here, Nick, I can play it real quick. So
no worries. Go ahead.
Hey,
I don't know if it's the same one.
If coming out of this meeting, there's some sort of call for a ceasefire, well, that's just going to be unacceptable because all that's going to do, Mike, is ratify Russia's conquest to date. All that's going to do is give Mr. Putin more time to refit, retrain, reman, and try to plan for renewed offensives at a time of his choosing.
Renewed offensives of what? If you're saying this gives him everything, he already has it. Wouldn't he already have it? Like what gives him time to do what?
Isn't it funny how whenever there are calls for ceasefire, the United States is like, oh my God, that's unacceptable. Then whenever there are calls for peace, they're like, how can you say the American people have the right to make that decision for the Ukrainian people? That is what you're doing right now. You see how they play both sides? How dare you decide for the Ukrainian people and say they should have peace? Meanwhile, hey man, should we do ceasefire? No, that's unacceptable.
Well, and
I think he says that. I think he says that in this clip or another one where they ask him, should Ukraine? And he was like, no. And he's like, what do you think? And it's like, yeah, and we're going to tell them no too, is what he says.
And I just want to put a point on this. Another criticism I get a lot when I say, I mean, you wouldn't think this would be radical to say, we need a ceasefire. The war must end. We need peace negotiations. I want the killing to stop. I want the killing to stop should never, ever be labeled a radical viewpoint or an anti-American viewpoint. But when I do say those things, another one of the popular pushbacks I get, the talking points, is this is Ukraine's decision, not ours. So I just want to let people know, if they're not aware of this, Ukraine would not exist if it wasn't for the United States. Their economy is being backstopped by the United States. Their government is being backstopped by the United States. And so is their military. Literally. There'd be no Ukraine if it weren't for the United States. And the 125 billion is just what we've given them in public. We have a black military and intelligence budget worth trillions that no one ever sees. Don't tell me that's not where they're putting their money. So I'm sure it's far more than 125 billion. Their entire society is dependent on us. Therefore, the United States has a right to say what happens. And the point I'm getting to here is the people of the United States, you, CJ, Nick, me, other folks, have the right to say to our government, we don't want to continue funding, killing, murder, and destruction. We want peace. It is a legitimate thing for a United States citizen to say. We are literally bankrolling the entire nation and their army right now. It is our place.
Sound like a Putin puppet to me, calling for peace. How dare you?
Let's listen to the last few seconds here. Let's listen to the last few seconds of this clip.
To plan for renewed offensives at a time of his choosing. We hope, and we've said this before, that President Xi will call and talk to President Zelensky, because we believe the Chinese need to get the Ukrainian perspective here. That
he thinks, who do you think, when he says they need to get the Ukrainian perspective, whose perspective do you really think he's talking about? Who gave the Ukrainian their perspective? That's a different way of asking.
They're not going to talk to the Ukrainians that went. They're not going to talk to the 40% of the Ukrainian people that speak Russian, that actually have family ties to Russia. That was part of the report that the BBC did quite some time ago, explaining how many people in Ukraine are pro-Russian, and that's why I have nothing but disdain for these NATO leftists who pretend they are standing for Ukrainian people. You are not. You are literally standing on one side of a conflict. You are supporting the fascists who use political violence, who threaten the president, who threatened Zelensky when he floated the idea of peace. There are people who used to go to pro-Russian rallies, and you have Nazi thugs who will use political violence on these people the same way that these liberals freak out about Republicans. In our country, they cheer on in Ukraine. So they do not stand with the Ukrainian people. They chose a side in a conflict. We need to make that 100% clear. But go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, so we got about another 5 minutes in the segment, not the video, but the entire segment. We're almost at the end here, unless you guys have some more receipts to add. But I want you to hear some of this more of this conversation about just how they talk about China and the meeting and just the fear sort of mongering they're trying to do in this segment.
Been 13 months, 14 months since Xi Jinping closely linked himself to Vladimir Putin. China may posture, Joe, talking about peace, but there's no way, based on its 12-point plan or anything else, China's going to be a force for peace here. So what this suggests to me, this reinforces the prediction that this is likely to be a long war.
Yeah, certainly.
This is likely to be a long war based off what? Him going to talk to Putin. That makes it makes him think it's going to be a long war.
No time soon. But this war continuing for a long time is not in the best interest, Admiral, of either of those men or their countries. I'm just wondering, I think maybe I always go one layer too deep on these things, but I would think if Putin were in a position of weakness before she was coming down and thought she was going to pressure him to move towards peace, the first thing he would do would be to visit Mariupol and say, don't even think about asking me to negotiate back the land bridge between Russia and Crimea. What are your thoughts?
I think that makes sense. And, I just happened to be in San Antonio, Texas today. I'm a couple of 100 yards from the Alamo. We got to remember that Mariupol is the Alamo of this war. This is where Ukrainian commando.
The Alamo of this war. Do you think he just happened to be right there? Do NATO or CIA people happen to be anywhere on the planet? Or are they shit scheduled? It's unbelievable. Let's listen.
Was held out till the very end.
Unbelievable.
Putin was forced to essentially destroy the city in order to conquer it. And look at the optics of the visits, Joe. He goes there effectively in the middle of the night so the cameras don't pick up the blasted landscape all around him. And he's driving himself. And, he's trying to show he's a manly man, I guess, but it's just a pathetic send-up if you stop and think about it. So flash back a year, he's really whispering, sipping vodka.
He's really having to sell this as a Putin looks desperate thing. I just don't understand who's buying this.
Telling his best friend forever, President Xi, hey, I'm going to be in Kyiv in 2 to 3 days. Well, here we are 14 months later, and he's like a criminal returning to the scene of the crime, as the Ukrainians have been saying.
Like, their language is so cartoonish.
Downfall for Putin,
yeah, like this is one of those segments. This is one of those segments that I don't even have to interrupt that many times, because how desperate they sound and how cartoonish their language is says everything. This is the response that the corporate establishment has as the United States lose global influence and power. China just pulled the ultimate flex on the United States. Russia and BRICS is the ultimate flex on the United States. So now Morning Joe is shitting their pants. Western chauvinist boomers are shitting their pants, and now they are overcompensating, and the rest of the world sees how desperate they are. This only works on a very small percentage of brainwashed Western chauvinists. The rest of the world sees this, and they say, man, the United States is scared, and they have good reason to be.
I don't understand. What did they think would happen, though, to these two countries? If you're going at both of them at the same time, why wouldn't the two people, your nemesis that you're going at, why wouldn't they just say, hey, why don't we team up? Like, I don't get the strategy. That's what doesn't make sense. Even for this empire, I don't get the strategy. Professor, if you wanted to chime in.
I'm hoping this isn't the strategy. We don't know how the elite, and there is an elite, those who run, like I said, Council on Foreign Relations, the inner core of that organization, basically set foreign policy for the United States and have for almost 100 years. We don't know exactly how they think. I do know this. They have bunkers, and never trust a psychopath with a bunker to run your country, because these people always think there's an exit plan for them. I think it was really well represented in, and David Sirota was involved with this film, but it was excellent in the film Don't Look Up, when the rich elite get on a spaceship and end up going to this other planet. And if you haven't seen it yet, I don't want to ruin the ending, but the point is they think they always have an escape plan. My concern is that there are some people who think this is a good thing that Russia and China are getting together, because they want the United States to fight and win both of them. That would be an all-out nuclear war. Estimates, sober estimates, are that a full-scale nuclear war in the world today would result in the deaths of 5 billion people. The atomic scientists, right? The group of atomic scientists has put the hands of the doomsday clock closer to midnight just a few months ago than at any point in history. This is serious. This is not, And I have to say, I do think there's some credence to the argument that there are some really evil psychos out there who want a world war with China and Russia. And we only have to rewind back to 2016 when Hillary Clinton lost one of the most winnable campaigns in history. Any normal, non-sociopathic candidate, she is sociopath, she's disgusting, normal sociopathic candidate would have beaten a reality star who, you know, whatever. Donald Trump is Donald Trump. That's a whole other discussion. And they immediately, they deflected criticism. Oh, shoot. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Hear you.
Oh. They immediately deflected criticism of the terrible campaign they ran, where they ignored and abandoned the working class, where she continued to give speeches for Goldman Sachs while in the campaign, a declared candidate, and kowtow to Wall Street, where she continued to take donations from private prisons. They deflected from all of that. And by the way, there's an excellent article in the New York Times from 2017, right after the election, where they went to black neighborhoods in Milwaukee. They went to a barbershop and they interviewed adult black men who did not vote for Hillary and did not regret it. And this is after Trump ran. And their basic, synopsis was, what have the Democrats done for us? What would she do for us? We're done, right? So they didn't want that criticism. So what did they do? They created Russiagate. And the creation of Russiagate, I think, was all about this. Hillary was supposed to win that election, and we were supposed to be fighting Putin 6 years ago. That's what they wanted then. And they thought they would have it, and oops, all of a sudden, by a razor-thin margin, Donald Trump won, and nobody saw that coming. Okay, so what did they do for 4 straight years? Actually, 6 now. They demonized Russia. They demonized Russia every single day. I'm not a fan of most governments, and I'm not a fan of most world leaders, and I'm definitely not a fan of Vladimir Putin, right? That's just my perspective. But the country of Russia, it doesn't seem to be much more evil than any of our allies, especially like Saudi Arabia. We can go on, and things we've done ourselves. So 6 years in the making, they have brought us to a point. And now they're demonizing China. They literally had Americans afraid of a white balloon floating up in the sky. You've got satellites that can read, your texts on your phones from all the way up in space. China doesn't need a balloon to spy. It's not 1870. They're not spying with balloons. It's insanely ridiculous. They want us to hate both countries. And now the war on TikTok is going on. And don't think it's not related to this. They don't want TikTok. They don't want to not be able to control that social media platform where you can kind of get anything because the algorithm isn't like Twitter or Meta, Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat and all of that. I do fear that they want that. That there are some people who believe we can win a nuclear war. And so what if tons of people die? They think they'll survive. And that is disturbing.
Yeah, you guys have no idea how sick these people are. You are 100% right about Hillary Clinton. You guys have no idea the bullet that we dodged with Hillary Clinton. We dodged the bullet. I did not vote for her. I voted for Joe Stein in 2016, and I would do it every single day of the week. Because Hillary Clinton called for a no-fly zone in Syria and called for shooting down Russian planes. She wanted war with Russia. And this is one of the reasons why Russia wanted Trump to beat Hillary, because Trump is way less insane than Hillary on this issue. And what liberals don't tell you is that Russia wanted Barack Obama to win over Mitt Romney and spread propaganda to help Barack Obama beat Mitt Romney, because Barack Obama famously rebuked Mitt Romney when he was pretending that Russia was our enemy. And Barack Obama was like, what do you think this is, the 1980s? That was the famous line from Obama. That one liberal
I remember that
had
one.
the brain broken. So Barack Obama, the drone strike king, Hillary Clinton saw his administration, and there was a story that came out in the Hill that I covered a long time ago that said that Hillary Clinton, and this is before the election loss, it said Hillary Clinton is pursuing a more muscular foreign policy. So Hillary Clinton saw Barack Obama, the drone strike king, the person who took 2 wars that George W. Bush had to turn to 7. Her response to Barack Obama was, "You fucking pussy." That's it. You guys understand what Hillary Clinton would have did to the world? Look at what Joe Biden is doing now. And then that would have happened faster and hella more aggressive with a more competent Hillary Clinton, because the Biden administration is definitely 100% incompetent. Hillary is an accomplished, a competent warmonger. She will go.
Remember,
go ahead, CJ. Go ahead.
Let's remind everybody, there was a debate. This is how they tell the story about Libya. There was a debate. Obama was on the leaning to the no invading or no not going in, right, and taking out Gaddafi. And Hillary was the one who was in the room saying, "Let's go in." She was always the one advocating more. She was always the one that was on that side. So we absolutely dodged a bullet with her. I'll do some announcements, and then you can go with, you ready for the Marjorie Taylor Greene story?
Yeah,
Nick?
we can do that one next.
Yeah, all right. So let's do a couple of quick announcements here.
Hey, I'm gonna share this just because I want to back what I said. Just real quick, not long. This is what I was just talking about. I don't tell you guys just believe me, right? I always want to show you guys some receipts. Look at the day here. This September 2015. This is one of many. I just Googled this. You can find many articles that said the same thing. The Wise Hawk. Hillary Clinton is offering voters a more muscular version of President Obama's foreign policy. What do you guys understand what would have happened if this psychopath was in charge of the nukes? Anyway, go ahead, CJ. I just want to add that.
I wonder if females have sort of the same reaction that blacks do. And let me give you an example. So you have blacks, but then there are black cops. They always seem to be the worst because they're going out of their way to prove I should be here with the white male. Do women do that too? Have you heard of this type of discussion? So it feels like that's what Hillary Clinton is. Like, to prove I should be here, I'm going to be the most hawkish, in the same way that black cops do that in the same beating of Tyler Nichols.
Look at the Prime Minister of Sweden and Finland, who was lauded as the first ever female progressive Prime Minister in Sweden and Finland. And they all insane neocons who've been calling for war with Russia. When you look at Liz Truss in the UK, all these women European leaders are more hawkish. I won't say more. That's ridiculous. But they are as hawkish, right? I'll correct myself. They are as hawkish as the most insane neocons in the UK and the United States. And the empire learned to shield themselves using black neocons and women, have them out in front, have a more gentler face of imperialism. So 100% right there, CJ. But I'll pass to you, and then I'll get to the all
right, so we got the Marjorie Taylor Greene story coming up next, but let's get to some announcements first. Again, you see him there, his face there. Professor has joined the Nick and CJ show today on this RBN Live Mondays. Join our Substack if you want to get notifications when we go live, when we have special guests like Professor, or when we drop clips. We will be writing op-eds soon. And Professor, we will have guest writers. Maybe somebody like yourself would be interested in writing an op-ed and then having it, in one for RBN Substack. We'll reach out to people like Danny Haifong and other writers. We know a lot. We know Wyatt. We know a lot. So it would be interesting to have RBN's Substack sort of be as a place that people can use as sources for articles or op-eds. So very interesting. All right, so those are all the reasons to join our Substack. With one bonus, you also get the link to our Discord if you join our Substack. The other thing, want to send a thank you to everybody who got us past 32,200 So we're at 32,200. Thank you for everybody that got us to there. And we had several people that has subscribed over the last several days, probably a couple of hundred people that have subscribed. So thank you to all the newbies here. If you knew, you may not have known, we have a $3.99 RBN YouTube membership if you're interested. Or if you prefer to give that same amount, $4 to Patreon, that's scrolling right down at the bottom. Patreon is the best way if you are to able financially support us. That is the best way to do it. And this week we're at our employee fundraiser, our labor and bills fundraiser. Every month we have, if you're able to donate, send to Venmo, Revolutionary Blackout Network. Revolutionary Blackout is the Venmo. And then Cash App is Mutual Aid Forever. Those two, if you're able to drop $1 or $2 so we can get our editor and paid adequately and other employees that we hope to get in the future. And then the last point, like the video, we are hovering around 400 or about to get 400 people watching. Let's get to 350 likes, and I pass it back to you, Nick, for the next story.
So this story is the perfect example of what I have been covering regarding the right-wing populists who pretend they are anti-war because they got an issue that is easy to get correct, right? Ukraine, anyone who knows the history, anyone who want to rebuke the Biden administration, it's easy to call out the United States on that. But I criticize many of these right-wing populists who essentially still support giant military spending. Why do you guys think that is? Well, they want to call it to the end of the Ukraine war. They support the end of Afghanistan, but they believe that Democrats have weakened the military. That's a common criticism you hear from Republicans. Barack Obama weakened our military. Joe Biden weakened our military. You had Donald Trump say we need to modernize our military. So the question is, if these people are anti-war, why the hell are they calling for a modern military? These are things that just don't make sense to me, that a lot of people don't even ask themselves. So I told you guys after Afghanistan, these people who support increasing the military budget despite ending the Afghanistan war, that cost $300 million per day. So how does that make sense? Where are you spending that fund, sir? What is your goal? And the goal of these right-wing populists is to expand war elsewhere against the real threats, the communists, the socialists, to expand war to maintain capitalist hegemony. And people like the average neocon, like Martin Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, they will argue that Ukraine war is largely a waste of United States resources. It's not that they're anti-imperialists. They believe our resources should be spent somewhere else. So with that said, I'm going to show you guys Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? And I cannot emphasize this enough because I think this still adds to our other commentary. It's deeply embarrassing that Marjorie Taylor Greene outflanked the squad on the Ukraine war. How do you allow this person I'm about to show you, who is absolutely clueless about the world, who's absolutely a puppet of the establishment, how do you let her outflank you on any issue at all? So Marjorie Taylor Greene is not anti-war. She is not principled. She is using this to attack Joe Biden. And based on my instinct, as I said before, they're doing this because it's a great political strategy, but I don't believe none of these people, because they are not driven by ideology. They are driven by hatred of the Democrats. Best believe it. It was Donald Trump. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene bootlicking him like she's prepared to do. Do not trust politicians. These people do not act in good faith. And that's always been the premise of all my videos about these people. Now, this video, I think I'm prefaced this enough. It's beyond ridiculous because you're going to have Marjorie Taylor Greene and Steve Bannon in the lead up of her insane comment, which is the base of this story. They still pretending that Jim Crow Joe is weaker on immigration than Donald Trump. You know, the guy who's funding the border industrial complex more than Trump, the guy who deported more people than Trump, deported more Haitians than Trump, who expanded and continued detention centers that they call migrant overflow facilities now. The right is still pretending that the Democratic Party is weaker on them on immigration, even though Barack Obama deported more people in his first term than Donald Trump. And what they are going to miss in this video is that the immigration crisis is a crisis of imperialism. This is a crisis of imperialism. You got a ton of Venezuelans, you got Haitians, ton of people who are victims of a U.S. empire that's crossing the border, and they completely ignore that part of the conversation. So
it's like Nick.
Right,
It's like they're sitting in a boat, and another boat has capsized because of them, and those people are trying to run over to the boat, and they're like, "We have a crisis of the water," and without telling you the story of what happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's what it feels like.
And these people also ignore the fact that the United States is losing net immigration over the border. That's something they never bring up. They pretend that there's this invasion. America is a shithole that people are leaving more than people are coming in. So this immigration issue is completely made up, because if you're a nation, you would think you want to replace your workforce. You got people leaving. You want people to come in. So this is all about people like, oh my God, white people are about to be displaced. That's what this is all about. This whole fear-mongering over borders that literally did not exist centuries ago. Read a fucking history book. The concept of open border during the Rome Empire, people used to cross all the time. It's a new modern capitalist construct that is enforced by white supremacy because white people are afraid that they're going to lose their population. That is what it is. And as Marxists, there's no tolerance for this shit. We are for the freedom of the movement for the workers. The same position that libertarians used to have. But anyway, I don't want to rant. I'll spare you guys, because I can rant on that topic all day. But let's get to the video, because I want to preface this.
It's so funny, Nick, because 2 minutes ago I put up a comment. Somebody said, I feel like Nick is going to go on another dishes rant. And you did. Like,
I can't help myself. So funny. I get to the damn video. All right, guys. I get to the damn video. I can't help myself. Because I saw.
No, they were saying in a good way, though. They were saying in a good way.
Yeah, I know. I love when you guys give me constructive criticism. I know I got a lot to grow on. Let's watch this video, and then I can comment a little bit more. I'm going to let it play for a bit, because literally the first 90 seconds is just immigration fear-mongering. You guys can chime in if you want. I don't have much to add. I already did. So chime in if you guys want, but the main point in this segment is going to come a little bit later.
How many Democrats were there with you, ma'am, to assist you in this field committee hearing that was so powerful, and heard Chief of Border Patrol Ortiz say we don't have operational control? That's a bombshell. How many Democrats were there to assist you, Congressman Green?
Zero. There were 0 Democrats there, Steve. You want to know why? Benny Thompson put out a statement. Now, never forget, you got to remember who Benny Thompson is. He was the chair of the January 6th committee, and he put out a statement and said that Democrats would not be coming to this hearing in McAllen, Texas yesterday for the Homeland Security Committee, because Republicans were going to politicize the issue. Now, let's talk about who politicized an issue. That would be Benny Thompson. As a matter of fact, not only did he politicize January 6th, he weaponized the federal government and the power of the January 6th committee against President Trump, the Trump administration, you, Steve Bannon, and many others. And everyone got persecuted just because of Benny Thompson and the way he handled himself as chairman. And then for him to make the sorry excuse for all the Democrats, and they didn't even show up. They couldn't show up for work. You want to know why, Steve? Because they can't face the truth. They can't.
So the Republican Party keep using this as their example of why Democrats are weak on immigration. Biden not showing up at the border. He's not showing up at the border. AOC is not at the border. These Democrats not at the border. Why they not doing photo ops? They don't have to show up at the border because they're funding them more. Nigga, why will you have to show up at the border when you can just write a check? Nigga, you understand that we live in the modern era, right? There is no reason for Biden to show up at the border. He can just write a check. He can support them monetarily. They had in March, and I covered this at the time last year, they had a border expo. I'm sure they're going to have another one again here coming up, where you have border control agents. It's like, you know how Comic-Con is? It's like Comic-Con for fascists, where they all get together, they show off new border control technology. And during the expo, they was like, man, it's crazy what the Biden administration is doing for us. We got all these new toys. We got robot dogs now. He's giving us way more stuff than Trump has done.
Comic-Cons for fascists. That'd be the coolest.
It is.
I can imagine them all dressed up with those costumes. You know, I want to just make a very
go ahead.
A point that for those who still believe that these parties are really fighting each other, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi gave Donald Trump every single cent he wanted for ICE, CBP, and to fight his war on immigrants, Trump's war on immigrants, they expanded the Citizens Border Patrol and ICE under Trump, and Democrats funded it without flinching. There was no fight.
Yep.
This is before the election. And then Biden takes office, and what does he do? You know, first of all, Biden's special envoy to Haiti resigned in disgust over the racist treatment of Haitian asylum seekers. And Americans don't know what's happening in Haiti if they don't listen to anything but mainstream media. Haiti is a shit show, and it is in no small part because of the United States. There are reasons people are leaving Haiti, and it's not just because they think they can have a quote-unquote better life, which usually means financial, in the United States. They're leaving Haiti because they're seeking political asylum. And Biden's own special envoy resigned because of our horrendous treatment. Obama's treatment of immigrants is well documented. The ACLU sued the Obama and Biden administration for, quote, horrendous, inhumane treatment of migrants at the border. Barack Obama and Joe Biden started family separation. Okay, there were immigrant families with kids whose children were taken from them at the border under Obama. What Trump did, he blew it up on steroids. He was horrible, but that all started with Obama. Obama put the kids in cages. Unaccompanied minors were put in cages, and Trump did it, and AOC shed tears, and Biden's even worse. But here's Marjorie. You know, Marjorie Taylor Greene is not a bright and shining intellect on Capitol Hill, and everybody knows that. But she's a good lapdog for the quote-unquote pseudo-populist GOP,
Yes.
right? Because she comes out. I knew when she came out against the Ukraine war, it had nothing to do with the war being wrong. It had everything to do with, oh, here's something I can oppose Biden on. So we have a choice if we vote the duopoly: World War III, or, well, then there's a lot of Republicans who want war with China too, so don't even go there. Or the populist version of it, we can have war with Mexico and whoever else they decide to invade. This is not a choice. It is not a rational choice. These people are not anti-war. They are pro-colonialism. Ukraine is a colony of the United States, and they want Mexico to remain a colony of the United States. Interestingly, the president of Mexico doesn't seem to be having it right now. He said some things which the Biden administration doesn't like. I don't know if you guys have.
Yeah,
any...
Zenkus, I was about to ask you just to hold that thought, because that's literally the next part of my segment. I don't mean to interrupt you, but hold that thought, because we're going to get to AMLO soon, because there's a reason why you see Lindsey Graham and Marjorie Taylor Greene now calling for troops to Mexico. So Zenkus, I'll pass it to you when that point comes up, because we're going to get to AMLO here very soon. Let me continue the video, because we still haven't got to the main part. The first part of this clip is immigration fear-mongering. Make sure the Republicans that support you are afraid, are scared, are groomed for the propaganda that you're about to suggest. You can't lead in with the shit that Marjorie Taylor Greene is about to say. You need a pregame. You need a warm-up. So the first, I decided to show, I was about to cut it, but I do think it's important to see the first part, because it's the warm-up to what Marjorie Taylor Greene is about to say later, which is crazy.
Face the truth and be exposed in that manner. And because we showed the American people, and thank God that Chief Ortiz finally admitted it, that we do not have operational control of our own southern border. Because all we hear in Washington, Steve, is war in Ukraine, war in Ukraine. We've got our own Republicans like Lindsey Graham and many others out there drumming beating the drum for war every single day in Ukraine, when the real drum we should be beating for war is the one against the Mexican cartels, because that's the one I'm beating.
What? Ma'am, are you okay? So she started to lean towards the populism, the anti-war Ukraine populism, and then immediately took a hard U-turn. And Is this what Marjorie Taylor Greene and the Republicans been grooming their audience for? Come on, I don't support the Ukraine war. We shouldn't be spending money on the Ukraine war. Mexico looking pretty sexy, though. Why we find a war in Ukraine? It don't mean they do geopolitical strategy for the United States, but Mexico does. You guys see what I'm saying? Their criticism is not we need to end the evil U.S. empire. Their criticism is that the direction that the neoliberals and some of the neocons is going into the wrong direction to increase the United States power. Do not get it twisted. They don't give a fuck about the cartels. You guys think they give a fuck about drugs? Who's the biggest drug dealer in the world? The United States. Don't get it twisted. So I'm gonna show you guys something. Feel free. I don't know if you guys. I passed it to you guys actually. I got one more receipt. CJ, Zenkus, anything you want to chime in on before I move on to the next part?
I'll let the guests chime in. Go ahead.
It shouldn't have to be said, but it is deeply disturbing that this is where the GOP goes every single time. They are more blatant with their racism. You know, you could turn on Tucker Carlson and find a good analysis of Ukraine or some other issue, maybe some populist thing against Wall Street. But he always makes sure to beat up on brown people, especially immigrants, and the queer community every chance he and the other pundits on Fox get. The queer community, and let's acknowledge it. I mean, that's going on right now in Tennessee and all over, like trying to make people's identities illegal. That's a go-to for them. That and brown people. We can beat up on immigrants. They beat up on the voiceless. They're more blatant and overt with their hatred, whereas the Democrats will say they kneel in the kente cloths when they're funding the police with $37 billion extra dollars, and Biden continues to militarize police departments across the country. I mean, they've got robot dogs now, and those robot dogs aren't to fight crime. Those robot dogs are there to stop protest against what the government is doing. But it's really sad, and I think of the lives of the people who come here to the United States because no one wants to leave their home country. They're forced because of the situations that our banks and corporations create in our hemisphere, right? We want them to be slaves and to stay in their country and be slaves. And it's just a supremely racist government. Both parties are a part of it. And it's unacceptable and horrible.
So are we actually using crime as a pretext to invade another country now? Do you guys know how crazy this is? So the Republicans and the Democrats and our insane ruling class has used crime as an excuse to occupy our neighborhoods and use violence against people who quote unquote resist the government, right? So they saw how effective that was. They saw how they tricked white America into supporting this war against their own people that the NYPD, the LAPD, the Baltimore PD, and many others are waging, the St. Louis PD, the KCPD, the list go on and on, right? So they saw that they tricked white America with that. Oh my God, no, come on, man. We just waging war against our own people because of the drugs and the crime. And they saw how successful that was domestically, and now they're trying to expand it internationally. Oh my God, look at the cartels in Mexico. We only got to invade that country to control it. And obviously, AMLO is having none of it. Anyone who's a critical thinker should have none of this. And now I'll pass to you soon, because I know you want to chime in more on AMLO. I'll read this tweet. This is AMLO. Your media doesn't even mention U.S. cartels. They just don't talk about it. It's as if the drugs arrived on a Martian balloon, as if people order drugs online via an invisible network. As if there are no drug traffickers in the United States. How do drugs get to the youth? Who sells it? Or is it only here? And then U.S. reporter so blown away, he was like, no. And then AMLO was like, but they don't talk about it. Just 2 months ago, they had to fire the head of the DEA in Mexico, and no one ever mentioned him again. So this is AMLO with the obvious response that you should have when you hear this nonsense. There's drug problems in multiple states. That is not an excuse to occupy. And you are out of your mind if you think that is the real reason why the Democrats want to invade. AMLO, as we explained before, has called out neoliberalism. AMLO has formed a coalition to rebuke the United States on their Cuban policy. You had Mexico, who recently had great comments about BRICS. They didn't say they're going to join. They hinted at it. They said it's a good option for countries who've been bullied by the West. This is stuff that AMLO said. He criticized the United States and their engagement in Ukraine. So he has become a menace that no one expected he would become. Like he still is more of a social democrat. No one really expected him to rebuke the U.S. West the way he has done. Now the Western leaders seeing this stuff is freaking out. So now they create a crisis, like the cartels who's been there my entire life. My entire life, there's been Mexican cartels. I remember the beheading videos back in the early 2000s that I avoided to death, right? But now all of a sudden it's a unique problem. You think that came out of nowhere? Ridiculous. Sorry, I'm gonna pass to Zenkus. I know you have some stuff you want to add.
Well,
then
I mean,
I'll wrap the segment.
We could undercut the cartels are pretty nasty. Like, let's admit it. That said, that's not most Mexican people. Just like when the mafia was at its height in the United States, that's not most Americans, right? You know, we're not the worst elements of the criminals in any given nation. But we could undercut the cartels pretty quickly. The best way to do it would be to legalize all drugs.
Yes.
Because I don't know anybody. And you're going to legalize crystal meth? Yes. Well, then people are going to do it. Well, my question is, if they legalize crystal meth tomorrow, are you going to go out and try it? No. And the fact that it's illegal doesn't stop anybody from doing it, and it doesn't stop anybody from doing heroin. In fact, there's really good arguments to show that if we legalize, and I do not mean decriminalize, decriminalizing still gives police an excuse to pull over somebody who's driving while black, because technically it's against the law. Let's do a search, full legalization of all drugs. These folks have nothing to sell, right? But remember, we fund our wars. We got the opium trade going again in Afghanistan. Remember what happened with the CIA during the wars in Central America and El Salvador and Nicaragua? We were bringing cocaine and crack into the United States. The CIA did it with Air America and heroin during the Vietnam War. So they want the illegal drug trade to continue. Of course they do, because it's a great way to launder money and to do terrible things around the world. But so they could do that. People could demand that we legalize drugs. Then there'll be no cartels. But just think of the audacity to say that we have the right to invade and occupy another nation, which is the opposite of what she's saying about Ukraine. Marjorie Taylor Greene is an idiot, but
exactly,
she's their useful idiot. But Mexico is our neighbor. We don't have a right to plow in there. And I will say one thing, which is another discussion altogether. They don't care about drugs. You're right. Addiction is a demand, not a supply issue. There's a reason overdoses skyrocketed during the worst of the pandemic, because our social networks were disrupted. Our sense of who we were in context with the world around us was turned upside down. People were depressed. They had anxiety. All of these things happened. And so they turned to drugs, which made it easier to keep going in a fairly sick society. So, there's a lot of really good work done on this, but one of them, and I'll just take a quick second. If is it all right? You tell me up or down. It'll take about a quick minute. They did an experiment called the rat park experiment, because they put rats in cages. And when you put rats in cages and you give them heroin or cocaine, the rat will just become addicted to whatever the drug is and eventually overdose and die. And they've been doing that for years. What they decided was, let's put rats, instead of isolating them in a cage, let's put them in a cage with other rats so they can have social relationships. And let's give them things to do. So they have like little balls to play on and wheels to run on. And it's much nicer. They can have families, and they could, cuddle together. When they did that and they introduced the drugs into the rat park, which is what they called it, most of the rats didn't do it. More than once they tried it. None of them got addicted and none of them overdosed. It is not the drug. It is our social environments which determine addiction.
Yes.
If the United States was serious, neither party is, about fighting addiction, we would stop focusing on supply and we would start focusing on creating a society that values each and every one of us, that helps people exist and reach their fullest capacity. That is not in the agenda of neoliberals or neocons. So, but it is the agenda of us. And there's more of us than there are of them.
Well said, Zenkus. And that's such an important conversation to have. And I'm glad you made that point. The last thing we'll bring up regarding this story is that it's not just Marjorie Taylor Greene and the right wing. Trust me, this is an establishment thing that's going on because MLO is pissed off the West. The United States have decided a strategy of strong arming otherwise close allies like India and Mexico to support their agenda. Now, this is CNN. Look at the fear-mongering towards the liberals. So you saw Marjorie Taylor Greene, how they used the border. They used the border to fear right-wingers. Look at the Democrat strategy. You see how they both play a role? Mexican president's electoral reform raises red flags, says random jagoff journalists. So here comes the liberal talking point of we need to send in the troops to save democracy. You see how the right wing heart tug is all about immigration? The liberal heart tug is look at MLO doing to democracy. Now I will be clear. I maybe need to look more into this. I promise you, this reform is not exact. It was not what the United States empire says. I need to look more into it. But they are trying to use any pretext to claim that MLO is some authoritarian autocrat, anything to attack him. And I've seen this ramp up more in CNN and MSNBC. So that's my last thing I want to show. This showed just one. It showed both sides and how their desperation to attack Mexico and essentially any ally who speaks out against U.S. strategy. Mexico has been a long-time trading partner. MLO, this is why no one really expected this, because Mexican presidents always had to be under the rule of thumb under the United States for obvious reasons, because they're so close, such an important partner. But MLO's like, man, fuck neoliberalism. I'm thinking about nationalizing crucial industries, and that is a giant threat to someone who's right next to the United States. So it's funny they criticize Russia for imposing their hegemony on their neighbor in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the United States can do that to Mexico all they want, right? Any last thoughts you guys have on this statement, Professor Zenkus and CJ? We can wrap this up here. Go ahead, CJ. I'll pass to you. Oh, unless you go ahead.
I'll wait.
No, as long as you can go.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, the Monroe Doctrine exists, right? So, Professor Mearsheimer of the University of Chicago has done excellent analysis on U.S. and NATO's shenanigans in Ukraine over the years. 7 years ago, he was predicting what happened today. If the United States didn't stop and NATO didn't stop trying to expand eastward, which we told Russia we wouldn't do. And one of the examples he uses is we've got the Monroe Doctrine in our hemisphere. By the way, it's not our hemisphere, but we think it is. We think of the entire North and South America continents as our playground, and therefore everybody has to kowtow to us. We still have sanctions on Cuba. Cuba is a tiny little nation that has never posed a threat to the United States. Why are they so afraid of countries, especially brown countries in the global South? And Mexico is near the global South for the most part, that embrace nationalism and or socialism / Marxism, because they're afraid of it. If they really believed that First Nations, indigenous folks in these countries, non-colonial people, those that worked that land and built those countries, if we really believed that their choice, like Venezuela or Cuba, to be socialist or somewhere moving towards socialism was a terrible choice and it was going to hurt their economy, and we were worried about that, we wouldn't be so afraid of it. We wouldn't have to fight it. We would just let them implode. We are terrified more than ever, we, the United States government, of socialism, of indigenous rights. Here in the United States, we treat First Nations, indigenous folks, Native Americans, and others, descendants of slavery, horribly. We treat them as if they're still slaves and we're still colonists. And we do the same thing with Africa. And we better watch out, because Africa's more and more aligning with Russia and China. And why would that be? Is it because they like their foreign policy? No, because those countries take the time, and it's not all done in a humane way. They take the time to build it up. Why do they hate the UK? Why did they not give a shit? Why were they dancing when and the Irish were too, when Queen Elizabeth II kicked the bucket? Because the colonial powers perpetrated genocide on the global South, right? Including India, which is part of Asia, all of that. And I think that we keep going from the same playbook, and we think it's going to work again. And I think it's like that abusive spouse who continues to abuse, thinking they'll always get away with it. And one day that intimate partner violence survivor stands up and leaves when they can, when it's safe for them to do it. We don't expect that to happen. How dare Mexico have a viewpoint different than ours? Both parties support this. Both parties in the United States are supremely based on the supremacy of white people of European descent. It is, and now they're flailing, and they're doing it in different ways with different rhetoric, but they're both part of it. So,
to your point, and then we'll read the super chat. Who does the now they're messaging their hate? The messaging from Mexico is easy for the GOP, since they always have been messaging against immigrants, against Mexicans. China too. So you notice that the two things they fearmonger the most, China and Mexico, those are the two places that they're willing to go to war. Everything else they're seeing as, oh, let's not do that. But they see these two as sufficient enough to go to war with. But let me read the super chat. Funny how this happened immediately after Mexico nationalized their uranium and lithium industry and is considering joining BRICS. And I think Nick, or both of us, during our conversation, we pointed out the same thing. Like, it feels like very a reaction to some of that other.
Yeah, a great comment by our comrade Jay. He was on Nick at Night last Wednesday for our return.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
You guys are gonna see a lot more of Jay. He's always fun to talk to, very knowledgeable as well. So I'll wrap with my segment there.
Yeah, I have one quick one.
Yeah, I'm gonna do the segment on Jen Psaki, RBN Live, but that's gonna be a fun segment. So the preview to that statement is like, as I said before, the United States is the most propagandized country. We have state TV essentially. We have the press secretary who immediately transitioned to MSNBC. So the pretext is completely gone. Like, you got it's a straight up a government mouthpiece that is operating as the fourth estate, and liberals are cheering it on. They have no idea what they're actually cheering on. Jen Psaki has the same exact job, it just with a pay raise. So I'll cover that Tuesday, I'll pass to you, CJ. But
yeah,
I want to say this because my quick announcements.
Go ahead.
Because regarding guests, this is gonna be a fire week. Make sure you guys like, subscribe. A lot of great content. Our brother Professor Zenkus has been killing it today. I'm gonna have Nico House join us at Nick at Night this Wednesday, so that should be a great conversation. Also Friday, CJ, powerful RBN episode. Garland Nixon returns to RBN, so that's Friday. So I'll tell you, we're ramping it up. We got a lot of great guests coming. Professor Zenkus bringing it today, and then I'm gonna have a great conversation with my brother Nico House and Garland Nixon. So that's coming up. Go ahead, CJ. I'll pass to you.
I'll do some quick announcements. So you hear with Nick? I'm sorry.
It's all good.
I tried to switch it.
Yeah.
You hear what Nick said? How did we switch that anyway?
I got it. Here we go.
There we go. So you hear what Nick said. Make sure you give us a like. You see, we're trying to do some extra work. We're trying to go the extra mile, bring you some better content, improve our content. Give us a like for that. Let's get us to 400 likes. We've had over 400 people watching. Join our Substack if you want to get notifications when we go live. We also have RBN YouTube memberships, $3.99. if you rather pay that same amount on Patreon, Patreon is scrolling right there at the bottom. You can, I think there's a $3.99 membership, or maybe it's a $3 membership on Patreon. So either one works, or both. 32,200 we've crossed as far as our subscribership. So welcome and thank you to all of those that keep pushing RBN. That's really the only way that our name is getting out. We had a meeting yesterday and the staff was letting us know that one of the numbers is that the way people find us is that they have to type out our entire name in order to get to us. That means we are being heavily suppressed. So all of your likes, all of your shares really does help. And now let's get to this final, I think it's the final story. Nick said that he didn't have any other ones. So let's get to this final story. And this final story is Democracy Now! Covers the anti-war protest that just happened. But before we get to the Democracy Now! Video, and it's very short, it's like a 45-second video. Let me show you this here, and this is part of this segment also. So let's set up the anti-war rally. Why do we even need one? So let's go to Sean Hannity here, and this is from Aaron Mate. I saw this. Sean Hannity, let's listen how he talks about Russia, China, and Iran. So let's listen to this, and let me know if you want to stop and chime in, and then we'll play the short 45-second Democracy Now! Video.
Russia and Putin's hostility and aggression against our country, the United States, has now reached a dangerous new height. Now, tonight, the question is this. What will your President Joe Biden do? Is he going to offer maybe another waiver for the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, put more sanctions in place? Putin's not going to care because he's selling his energy and getting filthy rich. He's selling it to China, the rest of the world. And all of this comes as a new axis of evil is emerging between these three top geopolitical foes. China's dictator Xi is now scheduled to hold a very rare but significant meeting with Putin in Moscow. So how much you want to bet they'll probably be trading jokes about just how pathetically weak America's president is? This is beyond embarrassing. This is danger to the safety and security of the entire world. America's.
So this I have to chime in. It was hard for me to stay quiet for that whole thing, but this selling, and they do this all the time, Republicans with Democrats, this selling that somehow Joe Biden administration, the people that's marching us to Armageddon, is somehow soft on any of these people is to make what he's doing seem like it's not a big deal. This is why I think this is a red-blue dance. It's them knowing he's doing some outrageous shit, but then they have to point to it and go, "You're not doing anything to make people think." It's how Democrats sneak by all the most terrible legislation. It's because of this, and this to this point that Sean Hannity is making right here. Play the video. All right, so let me play it, and if you want to chime in, let me know. And let me read this actually, because this is actually a good tidbit of information to have. The Pentagon recently announced it will devote over $3 billion of its already stretched thin military budget. They talking about a military budget of $800 billion. It's stretched thin to the climate-related initiative in 2023 alone.
Enemies are on the move. They are aggressive. They are consolidating power. They're creating partnerships and alliances that the world better take note of while Joe Biden, your president, is asleep at the wheel.
They're advancing their country's interests. How dare they? It's so ridiculous. Let's continue.
Putin took out an American drone over international waters. And I ask again, Joe Biden, what are you going to do?
Russia, it's so insane. It's so insane to just see real time a bully sort of throwing a tantrum about this. Like a sovereign nation is saying, "Hey, we're gonna stand on our own. We're our own people," and you getting mad at them doing that because you're so used to controlling everything. But this unhinged sort of rant from Sean Hannity, Nick, I can't imagine what that entire episode, because he was one of them that has been ranting against China pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, Sean Hannity was one of those who used to rail against China all the time.
That's why I said before, I'm very confused about the psychology of a Fox viewer, because they get Tucker Carlson first to be like, the Ukraine war, the United States should invest in the Ukraine war. And then like the next hour or two, they get Sean Hannity that said, oh my God, we got to fight Putin. Hey, how are these boomers not confused as fuck watching this shit? But anyway, go ahead, Zenkus, if you have anything you want to add.
I mean, it's comical. And you're right. I mean, Tucker's been pretty, you could see the clips that people are sharing around. He's been pretty clear in his opposition. And then Hannity, I mean, he's not a very bright man, and that comes across. You know, he reads the words on his teleprompter, but, you know, to say Joe Biden isn't doing enough, 125 billion in, 120,000 Ukrainian lives later, I don't know how many Russian soldiers, but a lot of them who probably didn't want to fight either have been lost. We blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, Sean. How did he not know we blew it up? And it's sad. It's sad that this is what it's come to. Neither party has any solutions to the real problems that America is facing right now at all. We've completely abandoned, I'll go back to East Palestine, we have abandoned the working class and the poor in this country. We've abandoned black and brown working class and poor. We are abandoning white working class and poor. Both parties don't have solutions, so they love to distract with their foreign policy. They want war. They want to build up toward war. But, you know, to think that CNN doesn't want this war just as much as Sean Hannity, they're just a little more nuanced in the way they push for it, is folly. The other thing, too, is all those stations are losing viewers left and right. Fox is in the lead, but in the demographic that matters, they're not doing well either. People are stopping to pay attention to two things in this country, and that is the most dangerous thing for the establishment. And I'll leave it with this. People are not paying attention to mainstream media. It does not hold the sway that they think they hold. And they're not paying attention to politicians. More and more people are disengaged with the stupid political process, with the parties that do nothing for us, with political parties that couldn't give us universal health care in the middle of a deadly pandemic, like that couldn't give us an increase in the minimum wage. All of that stuff, we're disengaging from their games. And that is what is going to end up hurting the establishment, you know. I don't know where everybody went. And they're terrified. They're just terrified because they know their clock is ticking. And I don't mean in terms of like their lives. I mean in terms of their power and influence. People aren't buying the bullshit anymore. And you hear it on the left and the right and the in-between. We're done. If they think they're going to be able to have a war against Mexico or a war against China or any of these places, not even talking about India. India's given the huge middle finger to the United States. They're buying Russian oil. They're dealing with China. They don't give a shit what we say. And why should they? It's their own nation. Colonialism is on its last legs, and sadly, it doesn't know it.
That's a good one to end, but to pivot to this video, and it just briefly shouts us out. It's a really brief shout out, maybe 30 seconds, 40 seconds, where you talk about the anti-war rally that just happened March 18th. This one is focused on the DC because they're in DC. So let's listen to the shout out.
Over the weekend, protests took place across the United States calling for an end to U.S. involvement in the Ukraine war as the world marks the 20th anniversary of the U.S. invasion of Iraq. In the nation's capital, people rallied in front of the White House and marched in the streets of D.C. This is Claudia de la Cruz from the People's Forum.
We're here to let the world know that we are committed as a people to shut the war machine down. The planet and humanity depend on us. We got to fight. We got to continue to demand an end to NATO, an end to Africa, an end to the Southern Command, and the levels of sanctions that the U.S. has all across the globe. We need to continue to make the connections of working class people in the United States to working class people all around the world. So we're here making those demands. We're also recommitting ourselves to lift up the anti-war movement once again.
The cost of war project estimates up to 306,000 Iraqi civilians have died from direct war-related violence, while hundreds of
360,000. That's what Democracy Now. Morning Joe said something like 100,000.
thousands more Iraqi civilians have died.
Okay, so that's all. That's pretty much sums up this segment where they cover the war protests. I wanted to establish the need for why we have to have these war protests. RBN showed up at both. There was one that had a little bit of controversy. We had a critique, but we still showed up. And then there was this one that we also showed up. We covered it. Make sure you check out the coverage. It's like a 2-hour event that we covered on the 18th. Check it out. Check that stream out. Go ahead, Nick. And
do not allow these shit libs that are pro-war to convince you that it's not worthwhile to attend these events. You hear bad faith actors say all the time, well, did this rally end the war? Deeply unserious, no strategy. How do we form a movement? How do we raise awareness about our crimes of empire without getting into the streets? They have no strategy, and they are more than okay with leading workers off a cliff. If they were serious about ending the war, what is their strategy for a starting point? You want to know what their strategy for a starting point is? Just fucking vibes. Let's tweet about it. Let's vote for Justice Democrats, and war may magically go away. We need to love our neighbors and lock arms with each other to end the war machine. Disagreement domestically aside, don't give a shit. Do not give a shit. We need to form a coalition to end the war machine, and then we will argue and debate what to do with the resources afterwards, because the task of doing so is so monumental. We cannot have the counter-revolutionary fucks who smear these rallies go without challenge. That's why I had no tolerance for that nonsense. But that's my last thought on the segment. Zenkus, anything you want to chime in on before we wrap up? Make sure you check your audio.
It's going to come across, I still do that every time. It's going to come across as a little out of left field. But yeah, we need to continue to do the work. The rallies in DC are great. People can also think about having rallies in their towns and cities. Local actions tend to get local coverage, and that's always a good thing. Fighting the war machine on many different fronts. Try to get union involvement. Let's work with Chris Smalls and see what we can do to build some more bridges there and get the workers together on this and connect all these dots. East Palestine, no raise in minimum wage, war in all over the world. It's all connected. And I want to say one final piece, and that is, it is important that we don't feel defeated. The thing that they want to first kill in us is our imaginations. And we need to be able to visualize, and I mean really picture it in our minds, a world without these types of wars, a world without racism, misogyny, all of those terrible things, a world with true justice. We can imagine that and believe in it, because that belief is the thing they are most frightened of. The belief that, and I remember this from Occupy Wall Street, that another world is indeed possible and that it is probable. And that's what gets me going each day. So that's my message.
Well said, as always. Thank you. My last reminders, and I'll pass it to CJ. Actually, any last thing you want to plug? We can get Zenkus out here. Any last things you want to plug, Zenkus, before we send you off? Any last thoughts? Obviously, you got Twitter there. Make sure you guys follow Zenkus on Twitter, always sending bangers.
Watch more RBN, everybody.
Absolutely. I'll pop you out. Thank you for joining us. It's always fun to have you on. Make sure you guys follow the professor on Twitter. Make sure you guys hit the bell, like, share, subscribe. A lot of great content coming up. RBN Live tomorrow. I'm going to cover the Jen Psaki story. And obviously, the Trump indictment that's around the corner, which, guys, I got my popcorn fucking ready. I cannot wait to see how this shit happens. I can't wait to see fucking
right. Oh, yeah, that's tomorrow, huh? That's tomorrow.
Guys, you know what I'm saying? This whole story is win-win for me. It doesn't matter what happens. Doesn't matter what happens. It's just going to be entertaining. So RBN's live tomorrow. You guys you can't miss that. Then Nico's gonna join me at Nick at Night on Wednesday, and then we have Garland Nixon RBN Friday. That should be extremely fun. So with that said, I don't have anything else, CJ. I'll pass it to you to wrap us up. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Yeah, so here is a RBN premiere. It's not going to have sound because the sound is the song called Cops Shot the Kid. But this is a video done by our editor, Aaron. So like I said, make sure you hook up Aaron and in the fundraiser, not hook up Aaron, but hook up our fundraiser, RBN Labor and Bills fundraiser. Venmo, Revolutionary Blackout, and Cash App, Mutual Aid Forever. Send your donations there. Let's hook up Erin and future employees we want to have. She did this graphic also, and she did this edit. Now, you're going to watch it without sound, but it's visual, so, you'll still get the video. And this is called Cops Shot the Kid, and it's about the epidemic of police killing children. So great video. Let's where am I? Let's watch it. Oops, here we go.
Cops used to come around, my neighborhood. All right, you kids, stop having so much fun. Move along. Oh, they'd arrest me.
Hear him scream,